Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. How's everybody doing today? So, I am getting ready to start working on another comic page from issue 7 of Morningstar. Before that, I wanted to give a shout out. We've got a new patron supporting the channel. Jack Zoyce subscribed to my Patreon campaign. So thank you, Jack, very much. I appreciate it. You're helping make it possible to make these videos and share my comics. I'll also be continually posting additional blogs, behind the scene content, and I plan to start doing bonus videos, one video a month on the YouTube channel. So I need to record the next one for October soon. But thank you, Jack, very much. And if you guys want to support my channel and the comics that I create, then there's a link in the description. It's patreon.com/Jeremy. See folks showing up in the chat. Sarah Studios, as always. Nice to see you, Sarah. So, before we get into it, I thought that I would show you what was on my drawing board before the page I'm starting now. Epic Trilogy is popping in. Hey, Epic Trilogy, how you doing, man? So, I was drawing a splash page before. Let me adjust the camera a little bit. Go out just a tiny bit wider. So I was drawing a double page spread for issue 7 because there's another double page spread that I added later on in the page. And I wanted to balance out the page count, so I added another shot earlier. So this is Isbaal, Queen of the Demons. She's sort of like perching up in a tree. Now, this page isn't done yet, but I'm not going to finish inking it in front of you guys. And I'll tell you why. I thought that this would be interesting to kind of give you a little bit of full disclosure. So what I'm planning to do is that the way this page is set up, she's actually going to be framed by sort of like the dark tones of leaves around here, and there's going to be leaves at the bottom, and you're really just going to be sort of getting light kind of in the midsection coming across, kind of framing her. But the way that I plan to fill that all in, I'm going to try and leave a lot of it just in Photoshop. So I'm going to use Photoshop tones to kind of give you the darker tones as opposed to actually drawing all the leaves in here. Because it would be really easy to clutter this up until it just becomes sort of a mess and you can't really see anything. I feel it would frame it better with even tones, but I still want to draw some of the leaves in there. And I'm afraid that if I'm doing the live stream and I'm chatting while I'm filling this in, I won't pay attention. I'll accidentally put too much in and create the clutter. So this page, everything that I think I've inked up till here, it would have been fine to be inking while I'm talking to you. But this is one of those pages where even though it's 90% there, I think the last finishing bit in terms of like just having a little bit more of the darkness of the leaves creeping in at the edges of the area that's going to be framing her, I could really tip this from a piece that's working well into a piece that turns into mush. So I'm going to save that fine, refined work to do when I'm not talking. And so I was thinking, oh, well, I'll just put that aside and plot another page. But I also thought that was kind of an interesting, since the whole point of this channel is to share my process and how I'm creating and my thought process behind the choices I made. This is, in a way, a creative choice. The stuff that I do where I need more concentration, I'll set it aside to a point where I can concentrate. Like usually I like to have podcasts on or listening to interviews, maybe have a documentary playing while I'm drawing. Sometimes I'm working on pages and I'm like, no, I need 110% of my focus, so I need to just have music on. Or maybe just ink in silence or draw in silence. That happens sometimes. Like I really can't, when I'm doing my thumbnails, that I can't be listening to any type of talking, because I completely need my imagination to be active and engaged. So I'm going back to the non-splash pages that are going on here. Let me just set this aside somewhere where the cats won't step on it. And the cats would. They love to stand on my artwork. I think that they are practicing to be art critics. So, page 7 of this issue. Oh, and I'm still in the process of finishing out my lettered sketchbook version where it has all of the rough layouts but lettered. And as soon as I get that finished, tweaking the lettering on the last few pages, that's going to get posted as a Patreon exclusive as well. So if you want to read the issue in advance, that is a great way to do it. So this is page 7, or page 6 of issue 7. Before I jump in, the first thing I'm going to do is I do my borders in Adobe Illustrator, and I do the borders before I actually, draw the page. What I do is I do my rough thumbnails on vellum, and I've shown the process before. We've already got these frames drawn out with the lettering loosely placed. There's a place here where I'm going to have Lucifer's hand breaking the panel border, and I had originally, when I started doing this, I thought about putting a little, just cutting the panel border so his hand would break across, but it was just simple. I thought I didn't want to spend a lot of time kind of futzing with it because I tend to be sort of rough and tumble in the early stages and just sort of trying not to be too precious about how stuff is framed and cropped out. So I just figured I would be moving this hand around as I go anyway. So I'm just going to hit it with a little bit of whiteout and go across the border there. Hit this over here. Take a second to get this going. I have a video on my channel in the popular videos playlist. My top 10 art making tools, and this particular brand of whiteout is one of them. It's a Pentel Presto correction pen. I just love the fact that you can get in there and actually draw with it as opposed to kind of brushing it in. Pro White I think is fantastic, and I do have a jar of it. Pro White is just sort of a white thick acrylic that comes in a, this isn't Pro White, this is obviously India ink, but the Pro White comes in a jar that's kind of a comparable size, and it's just a white, like very fluid acrylic paint. So sort of like in between white acrylic and between white, somewhere in between ink and acrylic paint in terms of viscosity, but it's really good for covering up or for effects where you're drawing into black. So, when I titled this video Various Monsters, I was thinking just about looking at the demons here at the start of this page I'm going to be inking. And one of my regrets, and I think I may have mentioned this in a previous video, but one of my regrets is that I didn't get more inventive early on in doing Morningstar with the different types of designs of the demons, the monsters that Lucifer and the archangels are fighting. I see American Swordfish popped in. You are right on time, man. Thanks for joining us. Glad to have you. But yeah, I regret now that I did not get more inventive with the different types of demons. My original thinking when I was starting this series is that I wanted to make it as easy for myself as possible. I already had 7 lead characters in terms of the archangels, and I thought in terms of the villains that they were going to be fighting, I designed Isbaal, the female demon queen that you saw on that splash page, that double page spread I was showing at the start of the video. And then other than that, I kind of wanted all the demons to be sort of uniform. Like I was thinking about G.I. Joe and how all the Cobra soldiers have that very same faceless, simple uniform. They're, they're all pretty much of the same type. And when I started designing these creatures, I thought, all right, let me keep it simple, make them all the same, kind of like that. So I designed these creatures to look kind of like, I was almost imagining that I was designing a uniform for them, like it's the demon suit. Tall, kind of slender man, lanky, mostly teeth and big soulless eyes. And that was just a simple look for them. They all kind of, looked and were constructed the same. But now as I've gotten later into this series and I've got little quieter moments I'm spending with the demons, I realize how much of a wasted opportunity that was. And even though it's a little bit of a shift to do, like in the last few issues, I started adding various body types now. So there's more quadruped demons, demons with 4 arms, 8 arms. I've got this particular demon I'm drawing right here that I'm happy with, where he's got another demon. Like there's a large quadruped demon, and he has another torso of an upper body of a demon growing out of him. You know what? Let me adjust the camera a little bit and bring the camera a little bit closer to the table so you can see a little bit better. At some point, I may try to get a 2-camera setup going so that you can get sort of a wide view and a tight view as I'm working. We'll bring this down a little bit, not so much that it's completely in your face, but just so you can see a little bit better of what's going on as I'm working. But yeah, when I titled this video Various Monsters, the thinking behind it was just that I like to think that I'm someone who tries to learn from their mistakes. I don't view mistakes as a bad thing unto themselves if I realize, oh, I can do something with it, or I can approach things in a different way. And part of the challenge, I think, in designing the creatures the way I originally designed them, is that even though you try to plan out a story very well, a lot of times you don't really know what you're going to need until you get kind of, in the thick of it, until you're already like shoulders deep and up to your neck. Like, I've often thought about the best way to do character design, and I didn't have this idea until after I'd already started Morningstar and done my character designs, but it would also slow down, I think, the development a little bit because it would involve thumbnailing an entire graphic novel or an entire series. But my thought was that it would almost be better to do the character designs after completing all of my thumbnails. Like, let's say that I had a 100, 200 page graphic novel, and I were to thumbnail out the entire series. And in that process, I would get to see the characters interacting in all kinds of environments. I would see how their body needs to move. I might discover that there's certain accessories or clothing accessories that either don't make sense or that they do need that I didn't put into the original design. And I would see that by seeing how the character is going to move in the story and how they're going to move on the page. Like, it's imagining like a fight choreographer planning things out, but then once they're actually there with their performers, like on a movie set, they're seeing in the environment that things need to be adjusted or changed. Certain things don't work the way that they may have planned it out. I feel like that's kind of what doing all my thumbnails helps me with. And that's a challenging approach because thumbnailing an entire long form series before before you've started it, that's a long time commitment without actually getting to the meat of the project. And I personally am fine with doing a lot of upfront work that no one sees. But the problem with that is that people forget about you. I mean, the whole reason why I'm doing Morningstar in serialized issues is because I didn't want people that supported my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, to just feel like, oh, well, he put out this graphic novel and then disappeared. They don't see me for 5 years, and I put out another graphic novel. So I thought, well, let me do it in single issues because I still know what all the chapter breaks are going to be, and I'll just pace it out so that the chapter breaks will be an issue. And that way, at least even if I'm only putting out 1 or 2 chapters a year, they're still seeing that I'm producing work, I'm still here, I haven't disappeared, fallen off the face of the earth, and I can stay connected with people that are kind enough to support the work that I'm doing. And I will tell you right now, I am dabbling with the idea of doing my next comic series as a webcomic. And maybe I'll only be able to update 1 page a week, depending on how much popularity it has or how much support it has. Hopefully I'll be able to move on to doing it more than that. But I think that I may do it. Again, this is all still planning stages. I'm just sort of talking out loud, talking out of my ass possibly. But I'm thinking of doing it, not so much shifting as it is adding. So I would add distributing it as a webcomic just to build awareness. And then as I get to each chapter being completed, to still release single issues. And then after the single issues come out, to maybe collect like every few issues into a collection that I would sell as like a mini trade, maybe have it available using Amazon or a print-on-demand service. And then when the whole thing is complete, eventually collecting it, maybe running a Kickstarter for a hardcover edition or something. So, but that's after I finish the series. It's still, that I'm still currently working on, Morning Stars, because this is still the second to last issue. We're not even done yet. But I like to think in long term because I've got a lot of ideas, a lot of stories I want to tell, and I'm generally always thinking about, well, what are the next like I'm not even thinking about what's the next story after this. I had an idea the other day for something that I was really excited about, and I figured it could be like a four volume series. I don't know if it'd be 4 issues or 4 trades. I still would need to work out how much story there is in the idea. But just having an idea the other day that I was so excited about, like even beyond the series that I plan to do when I finish Morning Star. So I'm always thinking about what I have to do next. I'm never worried about running out of ideas. I've got tons. I already have more stuff to draw than I'll be able to finish before I die. Yeah, but with these demons, one of the things I've started doing now is trying to make, when I've got a group of them, to give them little variations. Like I'll try to make one that has something weird about them, like the demon growing out of his back. I'll have one, like the one I'm drawing now, is probably the closest to the original demons. And then maybe having one that has horns like this guy over here. So I'll just try to, in that, and every time there's a bunch of them, I'll try to create some distinguishing features between that mass of creatures. And what I was saying before about doing character designs after layouts versus before, I've done character designs plenty of times. I did character designs and developmental sketches for both my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. I did a sketchbook for Morning Star where I included all of my concept sketches for the characters. Well, not all of, because I probably did a lot more than what I showed there. But even with that, a lot of the time, what I may have done in those concept sketches ends up changing and evolving. I'll figure out that I like the character to look a certain way halfway through a series. I'll realize it's almost like I am teaching myself how to draw the character as I work on the comic. And it's not that I feel that character designs aren't important to do before you start a project, but what I enjoy drawing and how I enjoy them looking invariably evolves over the course of myself. I'm not sure if it's true for other artists, but I know for me specifically, as I'm working, I find the character. I guess maybe like an actor performing a role, as they do it more and more, they start finding subtle nuances and they start getting what it is that they really are trying to say and express. In this little area in here, the silhouettes are getting a little bit jumbled. And usually I try to be very careful about that and plan these things out. But it just looked weird because I never drew the supporting back leg for this small demon here. It's almost like I'm using the limbs as a framing device. I'm just thickening this up because even though I drew it as super thin, this limb that's coming down, it's from a giant creature there. That limb should not be that thin. It just would not support its weight. It looks weird. I mean, you could draw a creature that's super big and like walking on skinny little legs, and it would actually work in this world. But I didn't really design this character to have that feel. I don't know if you can hear that. My wife likes to joke that our cat Kachu is my supervisor. Whenever I'm working, she likes to come in and just sort of add a little color commentary. But yeah, you know, I really enjoy working out the silhouettes and how characters overlap and interact with each other. It's sort of like the intersection between the 2D aspect of drawing and the 3D aspect of drawing. The 3D aspect of drawing being that you're trying to create the illusion of a three-dimensional object, even though it's on flat paper. And the 2D being sort of the graphic design, the silhouettes, the pretty shape. And that challenge of getting the pretty shapes to play nicely with the three-dimensional shapes. Play elegantly might be a better way to say it. By the way, I'm trying a little experiment. Not an experiment, but this time I made sure when I started streaming to turn off my Wi-Fi and actually stream from my cellular connection, because where I am in my house, I actually get a better, I believe that I get a better connection from the cellular than I do from the Wi-Fi. Like I've noticed in the past when I've streamed off of the Wi-Fi that the video is a little bit more fuzzy and it's a little bit low resolution. So let me know if it looks okay to you guys. I'm probably gonna, I didn't check the playback on the last couple of videos, but I'll definitely go back and check after I'm done streaming. But I realize that if I'm talking, you know, describing all this detail and putting in there, and it just looks like a fuzzy blur, that's not really helpful to you guys. And I'm also thinking about trying to include or mixing it up a little bit, because I've been doing pretty much just live streams for the past few weeks, but I'm also thinking about mixing it back up and adding in some of the videos, the pre-recorded videos. Epic Trilogy commented that it looks good, better, awesome. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. It means I'm doing something right here. I figured out something on the technical side. I want to try and get the visuals as clear as possible. That was the upside when I used to pre-record and just post videos, was that it was, you know, just the high-res recordings from my camera. So the quality definitely wasn't impacted by streaming then. And then once I started with the streaming, I'm like, oh wait, there's an extra wrinkle I need to worry about. I need to worry about the bandwidth at the actual time people are watching. So it wasn't something that I had initially thought ahead about. And then I could see, because normally if I don't have great connection in my studio area, it's not that big a deal. Sometimes I turn off my Wi-Fi and turn it on again and it comes back on, or sometimes I need to reboot my router. You know, little technical stuff that we all deal with. But for streaming, I want it to be as crisp as possible. I think the one feature, even though I've, you know, started varying up the demons, the feature I really love are just the teeth, just these big, massive gaping. Like I was trying to almost make them like sharks, and that's another thing that I think I might have changed if I were starting over again, and I might still work it in a couple of demons before the series is over, is just making it like just rows upon rows of like razor sharp mouths. But as it stands now, like that's their big unifying feature. Just big black masses with like just razor sharp teeth pouring out of them. The toughest part for me, I think, in these pages is that at this point of the story, the demons are all weak and emaciated, and it's trying to make them look still threatening and still fierce, while at the same time capturing that weakness that they have, that frailty that I'm trying to do. And mostly it's just making them a lot scrawnier, having their bones show through a lot more. Like I haven't really drawn it in yet, but the fact that they really are on this, a lot more of just their rib cage is visible. Anyway, these demons are now sort of presented with, or standing in front of Lucifer, who's sort of confronting them. Not really confronting them, but making a deal with them. He's there kind of bringing a peace offering. Yeah, beware Lucifers bearing gifts. So you should definitely be wary if he's coming to you with a peace offering. I'll tell you one of the challenges of not being able to spend as much time on the comic as I'd like is that the time between me doing the thumbnails and doing the layouts, and the time between doing the layouts and the inking, there's little details that a lot of times I think of, like in terms of how I'm actually picturing the particular page in my head, and I will sometimes lose little nuances. Maybe it's just the way that I plan to have a character's head cocked, or their attitude or a facial expression. And I try to, like, sometimes if I know that I may not remember these things, I will just make a written note in my thumbnails and say, make sure you draw it this way or include this expression. Because believe it or not, for me, sometimes it's just a lot easier to just write down what I want to have in the page than it is for me to try. The time to do a drawing that captures exactly what's in my mind's eye is the hard work. That's the thing that takes the most time for me, that I'll labor over. And if I'm going to do that labor, it almost seems like it makes more sense for me to do it either at the layout stage or at the inking stage than it does for me to sit there and do a thumbnail sketch and spend like hours doing multiple versions. I will do that if I'm doing a single standalone image. But for comic book storytelling, I feel like it makes more sense to leave myself the leeway to work that out on the page. And that's another reason why, I don't really think of inking as just mindlessly tracing. It's, part of it is because I'm inking myself, but it's that I try to leave myself a lot, not a lot, but enough to do that the page is interesting. Like I was listening to an interview with Klaus Janson, and just hearing him talk about, in his inking process, that he likes having room to have stuff to do on the page, and not just, like, he's a strong inker. His inks have a look to them, and you can see the Klaus Janson in the art that's he's inked of other artists. And I often wonder what my work would look like inked, say, by someone like him. I think I even mentioned in last week's episode, I had a little note on a page that the look I was going for was Gil Kane, inked by Klaus Janson. This poor little deer. When I usually have my wife proofread my pages before they're done, and I realize I'm gonna have to pull out the page that has the deer getting shot because she just will not want to look at that. It will just upset her. She's, member of PETA. She's definitely, I mean, we both love animals, but for her, just seeing anything with animals hurt is really, really upsetting. As opposed to me, who is a soulless monster and can just, watch things get slaughtered. And I do like the practice of getting more practice in on drawing deer, drawing different animals. And I kind of have Lucifer's wings draping down underneath the deer. I'm kind of dragging on the ground behind him like a cape. Sometimes you have to get unrealistic but creative in terms of where to put these wings. Otherwise, they would get in the way of the actual storytelling you're trying to describe. So yeah, sometimes I draw his wings doing unrealistic things, or any of the archangels with wings that just look wonky, or that would not be there, or it wouldn't work like that. But I don't mind pointing it out to you guys, because you guys got my back. You're not going to criticize me on this, right? You're going to let me slide, huh? Or you may tell the world, he's a fraud. He's a fraud. All right. So now the decision. Do I go back and work on the rest of these silhouettes more, or do I flesh these out, or do I go and put on the silhouettes the rest of the page? I think that I'm leaning towards going down and putting the rest of the silhouettes on the page. The way I tend to like to do is get all of the silhouettes done and then go in and do a pass where I not so much spot the blacks. It's not even about spotting the blacks per se. It's really about brush size. I try to use my holding line brush, my number 2. Oh wow, it's so blurry you can't even see it. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, so I try to use my number 2 brush both from my outside of my lines and sort of the defining areas of black within the figure. And then I save my 00 for doing the detail. And I really only use my number 4 brush for doing large areas of black. So it's really just 3 brushes I work with. But I try to do the outlines first and then come back and do the next level of detail. So I think that I will go and finish the outlines for the rest of this page and then come back up in here and work on more of the detail, because this is already dry enough that I can, run my hand off of it. I'm not working super wet. This I don't really want to rest my hand on, although in a few minutes it'll be done. So by the time I go in and do the silhouettes the rest of the page down, I can come back up and I can fearlessly lay my hands on any of the stuff I've done up here. I do still need to draw this in. There's a paw of the demon that's down here in the back that I didn't get. This in here is going to bite me in the ass, the fact that I didn't work this out properly, because now it's not framing the head the way that I want it to. I get the feeling that I'm going to come in here and either Photoshop to fix it, or I may end up painting out part of that foot and re-inking around it. Still not sure exactly how I want to fix it, but you know, for as much as I talk about planning stuff out and doing a bunch of thumbnails and then doing my layouts, stuff that I thought would come out just fine when I did my layouts in pencil, are just, you know, sometimes you get surprised on the page. Sometimes you get surprised in a good way and something looks amazing. Sometimes you get surprised in a bad way and you're just like, oh wow, I screwed the pooch. So this one's looking a little more poochy. So I mean, it depends. When I finish the whole page, then I'll kind of reassess, because sometimes I may just realize that filling in some black around that shape will fix all of the problems. Maybe just the difference of having the demon's actual face and his proportions filled in will fix all the problems. We'll see. It may end up not looking as bad as I see it in my head right now. That happens sometimes, where I'm critical of it, and then I get part of the way through, and I'm like, okay, stop your bitching. It's not that bad. So I'm constantly doing that balance between what I feel looks good and works versus what really is, you know, just poor drawing. And now I'm looking at this and I'm realizing, okay, I did actually intend this to be a thin forearm, the way I've kind of got it there. That is one of the challenges. Like what I'm actually did is I got distracted from this back part of the foot is not actually the back part of the foot. That's a rock that's in the foreground. And it actually is a very slender foot, or a slender leg going into this big foot at the bottom, which is kind of like what was supposed to be happening with the other foot. That's why this leg is so thin. So it's a little wonky, it's a little weird. I'm gonna go in there, basically paint some background into it, a little bit of cover up. Speaking of backgrounds, I am gonna normally I would do all of my backgrounds with that smaller 00 brush, but because this bush is in the foreground, it's one of the things that I try to do is make the foreground foliage a little thicker, a little larger. Oh, let's see. Annelton hopped in and said, how big are your originals in centimeters? Let's see. Let me put down my brush real quick. Unfortunately, us Americans are using our weird unit of measure instead of using the metric system. So I can never remember how much things are in meters and centimeters and such. But I keep a handy ruler right here. So this is about 28 wide by 43. 28 by 43. Is that one of the A sizes, like A4 or something? I don't know international paper sizes well. So if anyone knows what that comes out to, please pop it into the chat and I'll call it out so everyone else will know. And hopefully I can remember in the future. So if someone else asks me, I can just say, oh, it's A4 or it's this or it's that, because I am sadly ignorant on international paper sizes. Plus, you know, when it comes to making comics internationally, I mean, manga paper has its own specific proportions that are a little bit different from Western comic proportions. So, you've also got everyone around the world doing their own thing. I know that a lot of the Filipino artists that kind of exploded in DC Comics in the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of them they didn't realize that comics were drawn, enlarged, and then shrunk down. So when they would turn in projects, they would have these pages that were drawn at print size, but incredibly detailed. So like Alfredo Alcala, I think Tony DiZanega, guys like that. You look at their work and it's just like incredibly like beautifully detailed. And I think that skill comes from the fact that they could, once they realize, oh wait, we don't have to draw super tiny. Wow, we can put that much more detail into the work. So that just takes a masterful level of control that I am in envy and awe of. Being that I am much more of a rough and tumble inker artist in terms of my style. Like I never really thought of him as an influence because I wasn't aware of him when I was first, getting into comics. But Paul Pope is somebody who I really like his work, and I would say that if I were to compare myself, not in terms of his craft, in terms of his skill level, but in terms of stylistically, how Paul Pope's work is very loose but intentional. He's not laboring over it, or he doesn't appear to labor over it, and it has a very, very fluid, relaxed feel to it, but it still expresses exactly what it seems like he's trying to get across. That's what I think I'm going for. That's what I would compare myself to stylistically. With apologies to Paul Pope, I should say. I always feel bad whenever I compare myself to any artist because I'm afraid that they'll look at my work and say, oh, you think my stuff is like this? Not because I hate my own work, but because I hold a lot of other artists in very high regard. I mean, again, I tell you, I try to be really positive about my work, that I try to be appreciative of the things I can do that I am happy they come out with. And then the things that aren't necessarily as good craft-wise, I don't try to say, oh, well, I suck. I just try to say, oh, this is something to work on. I try to frame it simply as the process is to grow and improve. It's not about patting myself on the back. But I remember I was at WonderCon one year, and was it Stelfreeze? Brian Stelfreeze was there, and, selling an art book and a sketchbook. And, I just went over and was chatting with him a little bit about the creative process in inking. And, other artists I know have told me that he is the full-on art professor. If you sit down and talk to him, he will just crack open knowledge about storytelling and writing and art. So we were just talking about storytelling and craft, and I went over back to my table and I got a copy of my book, and I asked him if I could give him a copy because I had been really... He's not somebody that I feel like stylistically I'm influenced by so much as I admire how clean his work is and how precise it is. And I was looking at his work in terms of how can I stop making sloppy marks? How can I make my marks more intentional? And his work is very intentional. And so that's one of the reasons why I had been looking at his work a lot lately, aside from the fact that it's just damn beautiful. And so I gave him a copy and I told him that he'd been really influential in me trying to, clean up my style. But I also felt bad because I'm sort of like, giving him a copy and I'm thinking, oh, like if I tell him he's an influence and inspiration to me, and then he looks at it and it's sort of like that first graphic novel I'm still proud of. I still sell it at conventions. I stand behind it. There's some rough shit in there. It's not perfect. Definitely not perfect. But that's, that is the case. I see my nephew has popped in. Clay, how you doing, Clay? Oh, we also had some more comments on the paper size. Epic Trilogy said that A3 is 28 by 43, and he says he's from Canada and had to get used to the Euro sizes. So it's a little bit smaller than 11 by 17. So I would say that since it's a little bit smaller than 11 by 17, A3 is probably the closest to what I'm using. But yeah, so I'm doing 11 by 17. Rich Dumont said you seem to mainly use straights and angles as opposed to curved lines. Is that just a design choice? Well, it is a design choice in the fact I think that it's a stylistic choice in that I'm a very angular artist. I tend to draw in sort of rough shapes. I still haven't trained myself to make very smooth, loose, curvy work. And particularly when I'm inking, I find that I try to. Someone explained the idea to me once for inking of throwing lines, meaning that you almost look like whatever shape you're doing, like this curve underneath here, that you pick your starting point and you can kind of make a slow, smooth arc like that, or you can kind of go and just sort of like treat each line that you're making like you're just sort of like rapidly throwing it, like literally like you're just going kind of throwing it away from you, like always trying to work from that natural curve of the arc that the hand makes. I find that I like the way my work looks more when I have these more angular strokes. I feel that the corners and the way that the shapes turn around an angle, I feel like I get a better sense of the shape and the silhouette that I'm trying to convey by going 1, 2, 3, as opposed to just going and doing a soft curve. So to a degree, it is a stylistic choice. Although I believe that really skilled, really experienced inkers can make either one look attractive. I think that a really skilled inker can really just do tons of curvy lines and use almost no straight lines and make something that's just as effective in terms of describing their figures as someone who's using a lot of these sharp angular lines. So it's both stylistic, but also I do feel that to a certain degree it is a limitation of my my current drawing skills. I've been told by many people that I use too many straight lines and that my stuff isn't as fluid enough, and I'm aware of it. But also, to a certain degree, like I look at someone like, say, Mike Mignola and his Hellboy work, and his Hellboy work is very blocky, and I think that it suits both his material and his drawing style. So it is something that I would say that it's a middle ground between I know that I do it and I choose to continue doing it, but I also know that there's a certain skill that is worthwhile in exploring doing softer, curvier lines. I think maybe I use curvier lines when I do my standalone art pieces as opposed to comics, because I'll work a little bit slower and I tend to leave the lines more open so I can paint into them digitally. Yeah, it's definitely not something that I would say, oh, learn how to make just everything angular. I think that if you naturally draw with kind of a loose, like a more softer, curvier line, that it's, you can express a lot with it. And I think the best art is art that combines both, where you have the contrast between angled lines and hard lines. That way you get a nice break in rhythms, kind of an ebb and flow. I see my nephew Clay asked how I'm doing, and I am doing well. Anytime I can sit around on the weekend and do some drawing is a good time. So this is what I enjoy spending most of my spare time doing, is drawing comic books. his hand breaking the panel border there. And to be honest, this isn't a great panel break. Normally, I was told a long time ago, I think when I there's a comic studio that I was in when I was in high school. One of the things they mentioned, and I think this is something that comes up in the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, is that if you're gonna break a panel border, don't just do it with one little line. Like, really break it. Like, have a whole arm go across, or have multiple fingers go across. And this is a pretty weak panel break. It's just a pinky going across. But the reason for that is because compositionally, I really wanted to have Lucifer here and have his hand in just the right pose. Like, in order to get the sense of the hand and the gesture of him kind of like telling these other guys to just kind of hold their horses and chill. In order to get that, this was sort of like the best place to pose the hand along with Lucifer. Like, as it is, I already feel like sort of the foreshortening is very compressed. And the fact that he's got to communicate that he's telling them to hold on. He's also got this deer across his shoulder, and wanting to make sure that all of that was clear. It really comes down to that this was the best place for me to place his hand, because there's also word balloons covering up this upper area, and I want to make sure they didn't cover up the hand. Having all of those things going on at one time, this positioning of the hand seemed to work the best for this story moment. And in that, I didn't want to clip off. Like, it seemed really weird. I would have been fine. I would have been fine clipping off that tip of that finger, except for the fact that it ending with just getting cut off there just felt really weird. And then pushing it more into this side would have eaten up a lot of, because there's also a lot of dialogue in here, it would have eaten up real estate on the next panel over. So I thought, as opposed to eating up real estate in here that I couldn't really afford, and it was just didn't seem to work, it was awkward pushing the hand more back into this side of the frame, I just said, all right, the pinky's what's going to break the panel. So this is one of those things that I think I will get better at over time as I continue to make artwork. I think that there's definitely ways I probably could have, if I spent even more time composing it or just doing more comic pages. You know, that thing that they talk about, pencil mileage, of just doing the work over and over again? Drawing comics over and over again, I'll see different ways or find different solutions. I think there probably could have been a slightly better solution. This is a case, much like my buddy Ion Rocks brings up, that sometimes I need to just say, does it tell the story I want to tell? If so, accept it and move on. This was a battle that I wasn't willing to sit there and fight the page for like days, weeks, hours, trying to find the just right thing. I felt like what I ended up with conveys the story beat, and I was fine with that. I accept it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but it also was not like a full-on deal breaker for me. I see Red Hood 117 popped in. Heyo. Just to let you guys know, we're at about 53 minutes now, so I'm going to cap it at an hour and log off. So if you guys have any few questions here at the end, then please feel free to pop them in the chat. And as I have mentioned at the top of the video, you know, I've got the Patreon up and running. If you're enjoying these videos, please like them, please share them, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to help contribute to me continuing to make comic work and continuing to create videos that I'm sharing the process on there, then feel free to hop over to my Patreon. You can subscribe for as little as $1. And I also share additional blog posts every week showing work in progress on the comic, as well as other like figure drawing and other works I'm doing. I'm going to be adding extra videos for some of the other higher reward tiers. So, you know, it's a great way, you know, subscribe to that. You can see some extra work and extra art. You'll see all the comics early. And I appreciate the support, because this comics business is hard. Yeah, I thought that by the end of this video, I would make it back up to the top to the demons to flesh them out a little bit more up there. But I do find that I am taking more time and inking a little bit slower these days, just because I'm putting more detail into the pages than I used to. So it's one thing to be going slowly just to be going slowly, but I think that, you know, adding actual, you know, detail and trying to make the pages better is a reasonable reason for me to take more time. And what's the point in doing this over and over again if I'm not going to try and improve with each issue and with each page? A little tired, a little sleepy. There's places where this deer's legs are beefier than some of the demons. All right. Come back up here and work these guys a little bit more. So usually I try to start by just thinking, well, what's the underside? And start with laying in the blacks in there. And I've been trying to think a lot more about actually turning the form. So not just what is the area that's in shadow in terms of like the idea of spotting your blacks, spotting your shadow and creating an interesting design, but literally saying, all right, well, what's happening at the place where it's turning from dark to light? Because when I take figure drawing classes, it's all about turning shapes. It's all about moving around the form and giving that sense that the you can feel the muscles moving in and out and around the bones and the general volumes and structure of the human form. And it is more challenging when I'm dealing with these creatures that are primarily dark. Trying to make sure that I both convey the feeling, the tone that they have physically, without losing that, both conveying the anatomy at the same time as conveying the fact that there's these creatures that are mostly dark. It's like where to leave in just a little bit of light so that you can get a hint of a shoulder blade turning, versus just having areas where their faces are just pools, or like a torso where like all the detail just disappears and it's just darkness. It's an ongoing balancing act. All right, so that is it. Thank you everybody for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed it. If there's any questions you have later that you didn't get to or you think of later, feel free to post them in comments on the video, and I will try to either answer them in the comments or bring them up at the next live stream. Like I said, please like, please share, please subscribe. There's a link to the Patreon in the description, a link to my newsletter. Hey, look at that. Patreon.com/Jeremy. That's it for now. Go be creative.